I just want to make sure this clicker is going to click properly. So to start today, I'd like to ask a question. And the question I'm going to ask is, I'm not going to ask you to put your hands or tell me your answer or tell anyone your answer. But I would, oh yes, it's working. I want to ask you, are you so happy in your current job that you can hardly stand it? Now, there's an important reason that I asked that question. First of all, I hope everybody in this room answered, yes, oh, I love every day at my current place. Don't fall asleep if that's the case. Obviously, if you answered, not really, then you probably want to listen to a few things a recruiter may say. However, in my experience, I have found that people who are so happy they can hardly stand it, those lucky people, they don't maybe make a lot of effort to keep themselves out in front. And so really the focus on my presentation is to talk to both the people who aren't so happy and the people who are so happy with the same goal, which is to get you to think about your digital footprint, how you are presenting yourself to the world of opportunities. I guess the first thing I want to give you is a cautionary tale. And this is about a real estate professional. It goes back to, say, 2005. And this real estate professional was in corporate real estate for IBM. And he was so happy he could hardly stand it. Well, I guess we should give him a name. So let's call him Ned. Okay, we'll just call him Ned. So Ned is at IBM. Ned is happy as a clam. Ned has a great boss. She's terrific. He has absolutely drunk the IBM Kool-Aid. He thinks Big Blue is wonderful. And he thinks Sam Palmisano is the greatest CEO on the planet, which he was at the time. He enjoys working with his colleagues. He likes what he does. And it's all a good story. So, now let's go back to 2005. And Ned is leaving the office at the end of a week. And, you know, sometimes he gets calls from those creatures called headhunters or recruiters, but frankly, typically doesn't take the call. And if he does, it's a really short conversation, because why should he talk to them? He's not interested in anything. And he's not doing the networking thing. You know, he should be a member of CoreNet, but he wasn't. He should have been involved with IFMA and BOMA and all those things, but you know what? He had a great setup. All right, Friday, 5:30, leaves the office. Monday morning, 8 o'clock, he comes into the office, goes right to his wonderful boss, and says, Andrea, I'm going to be looking for a new job, one that will give me a chance to make a lot more money on full commission. Just thought you should know. So, stuff happens. Now, by the way, this story has a really happy ending, so that's all good, but that's for another day. The point to this story is that things occur that are beyond our predictive powers. And I guess for probably everybody in this room, the first thing that's coming to mind right now is Walgreens. If you heard the news this week, Walgreens laid off, gave pink slips to 20 people in the real estate group. You know, I don't think anybody saw that coming. I mean, there's no reason really to think that was going to happen. We can't see what's coming down the pipeline on a personal level or on a business company level. Companies get outsourced. They merge, they right-size, they rationalize, whatever. Things happen. So the point of this discussion today really is to give you a prod, give you tips, suggestions about being prepared. Now, it is focused on LinkedIn. I'm not getting paid by LinkedIn. I don't get a sponsorship from them. But as I'll get into later, LinkedIn is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Okay, and I'll talk about how it's changed my world as a recruiter and candidates' world. If during this presentation I say something stupid or outrageous, which is probably inevitable, or you have a question, or you disagree, or you just want to shout abuse, don't save it to the end. Go ahead. Throw up your hand or just shout out at me. That's okay. So I want to talk about the first step in being prepared for change. And it seems so obvious. I mean, I think what's the screen says? I'm looking both ways, but be excellent at your job. I mean, what a ridiculous thing to say. Isn't that go without saying? But what I've noticed in terms of the world of recruiting and talking to people is, especially if you're not so happy you can hardly stand it, you can let things slide a bit because you're now sort of thinking about, okay, where are we going? What are we going to do? What's the next step? Well, the first step is performance reviews, references, what your colleagues say about you. So you've got to really be doing a great job, notwithstanding whatever circumstances you're in. If your boss is the devil, I'm sorry, you gotta hang in there and be excellent at your job while you're still there. Because for my world, references count. A good recruiter, whether it's a corporate recruiter or a third-party recruiter like myself, we will check references and we'll ask questions that you want answered the right way. And your mother doesn't count as a reference, so I'm not calling her. The next thing is also blindingly obvious, right? Karma. Treat other people well. I'm going to give you a cautionary tale number 2. And that is, when I take on a search, when I have a mandate from a company to go find Cinderella, one of the last things I do in a meeting with a hiring manager or head of HR or whoever is I ask them to tell me what people are going to say to me in the market about their company. And I do that because part of my role is to tell a story about my client, truthful, but also correct any misperceptions that are in the market. For example, I'm going out there and I phone a candidate, I say, we've got a director of development role at ABC Developments, and the person says, ABC Developments, they beat their staff twice a day. Are you kidding? I wouldn't go there. Well, part of my role is to say, stop, hang on, no, you don't understand. New management at ABC Developments, kinder and gentler platform. They only beat their staff once a day. You'll love it. So I always ask a hiring manager, HR person, what am I going to hear? Frequently I sort of know the answer first from research and stuff, but hey, I want to hear it from them. So a couple of years ago, I have this meeting, I end it like this, and the hiring manager says to me, you will hear good things about the company. You'll hear good things about our Chicago office. We are a great place to work and we have a good reputation. Turned out to be all true. And in fact, I think I hired 2 people for the company and they're both still there and they both have worked out well. However, during my recruiting calls, when I call people, I call total strangers and bug them, interrupt their workday and say, I want to talk to you about an opportunity. When I would mention this hiring manager, I would get a consistent refrain. The refrain would be, oh, so-and-so, they never return my call. Oh, so-and-so, brutal to get a hold of. Oh, so-and-so, they'll only call you back if it's in their best interest or they want something. Now, we're all crazy busy. We all have too much on the go. We get too many emails, we get too many voicemail messages. And so we all drop the ball occasionally. We all forget, don't respond. But what I saw here by what I was hearing was a long-term pattern of behavior. Now, I want to add a little point to this. This hiring manager was as happy as they could hardly be. They could hardly stand how happy they were at the company. They'd been there at this point, I think, 15 plus years. I think they really believed they would be there to retirement day, which is not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with that. Can you guess where I'm going with this story? You know what happens? Several months ago, I get a phone call. And I get a phone call from this person. And they told me that they were going to be now looking for a new opportunity. Structural changes. In fact, their company had gotten taken over by another major organization. So stuff happened. Now, this person, this hiring manager, is a good professional. So I would think at the end of the day, they will get a new gig because they have competence. They have this quirk about not returning calls. But the point of this little cautionary tale is do you think it might have been easier for them if they hadn't alienated so many people? Wouldn't it be easier to not just be phoning me, but to be able to put the word out to your competitors, colleagues, all the people you interacted with, and say, you know what? Structural changes, I've got to find a new place just to talk, ideas, referrals, all sorts of good stuff. I think they gave that away. So I urge you, my second point today is just sort of think about how you are interacting. I mean, it's just a thought. You know, because I don't know if you believe in karma or not, but sometimes what goes around does come around. Now, I want to now switch to talking about throwing out breadcrumbs, posting markers, doing things to potentially, even if you're not interested, potentially lure people to that wonderful, amazing, fantastic person of potential and competence that you are. And, you know, you do that by, first off, a digital footprint. And how can you do that? What are ways of doing it? Well, a simple way of posting markers, getting yourself out there, is what you're all doing today, which is you're getting out. You're doing a event, an association, a network. But here's one little tweak I'd like you to think about, and I guess Debbie, or it was in a way, did a bit of promotion on that part, which is try and be involved if you have the time and energy, or make the time and energy to be a committee member, committee chair, get involved in whatever your IFMA, BOMA, CORNET, IREM, because it's a win-win situation. Because you see, many of these associations, including IFMA, the website I looked at this morning, they have, for their officers and directors, typically have put the list of people up. And frequently there's a little bio, depending on the website, there'll be a little bio. This is, you know, none of these women, and I just picked this at random, okay, there's no backstory to why I got this screenshot, but perhaps none of them are interested in opportunities right now. They're all perfectly happy. But the fact is they've created a digital footprint other than LinkedIn for themselves. And I think that's a really positive way to get yourself out there. So I strongly urge you, again, I say it's a win-win. You know, you're doing something, you're giving back and all that. You're starting a pattern of behavior, which is a positive one. Now, introductions in our world now. Like I think I said, LinkedIn doesn't sponsor me. I'm not, you know, getting anything from LinkedIn. And I'm not a social media person. I'm not much of a Facebook person. And I hear from people of my vintage generation, old age, you know, social media. Well, LinkedIn is not your kid's social media. And LinkedIn has changed my world of recruiting. And I'll give you an example. In the old days, when I pitched an assignment as a recruiter specializing in real estate, I had a black box. I had magic potion, I had secret sauce. And that was our wonderful database. You know, I think my old firm, we had 40,000 real estate professionals in our database. You know, you had all these people that were experts that nobody else really had. So your sales pitch was a bit like, you know, I'm a specialist in real estate recruiting. Aha, I've got something that you don't have. Well, guess what? LinkedIn has taken that and pulled the rug out from under us. So what that means to you potentially as a candidate or someone who might want to hear about opportunities is, and I hate this aspect of it, is it means that if someone is a recruiter in another area, but they've got a good client relationship, they can say to that client, I can do that search for you. I can find you the facilities manager in Chicago for you. Because their database is LinkedIn. And other methods of digital Sherlock Holmesian work But primary focus, I bet you dollars to donuts, they're going to LinkedIn first. So from your situation, what that means is, one, you can be rude to me because I don't count that much anymore in terms of recruiting. But more importantly, there are people that really don't know what they're doing out there looking perhaps for someone like you. So you gotta make it easy for them to find you. People always send me resumes, people that are active or want to be kept in mind. I now actually would prefer, rather than an attachment, I prefer if they just cut and pasted their LinkedIn URL and sent that to me. I'll get the resume at a point where it makes sense to have it. And again, I don't ask people to put up hands and all that, because you don't need that. But I'd like every one of you to think for a second, gee, could I cut and paste my LinkedIn URL and send that to somebody that might have a great opportunity or know of a great opportunity? So before you go and rush out and change your LinkedIn profile to make it more of a marketing device, because that's what it is, it's a marketing tool, I'm going to talk about most people, how they present themselves on LinkedIn. Now, this is my favorite Gary Larson cartoon of all time, and you can't see it at the back, and I'm sorry for that. So I'll have to sort of paraphrase it, but it's how I feel that too many people are on LinkedIn, which is they have great intentions, and they think about it and they say, yes, when I meet Jane, it's going to be, hello, I'm Tarzan, I'm king of the jungle, and it's something very eloquent and nice. But at the end of the day, most of us, on LinkedIn especially, are still in the me Tarzan, you Jane stage. We're at the, we really haven't gotten it. So I'm going to keep on pressing everyone sometime over the near future to go and look at their profile on LinkedIn and do something with it. Now, here's the question. I get this a lot. Yeah, please.
So are you suggesting just what you said previously about you would like a LinkedIn
URL
profile before the resume? Are you suggesting that your information on LinkedIn should look sort of like a pre-resume?
It's almost like I staged the question. I'm actually in about 2 screens from now. I'm going to get into my belief about LinkedIn and where people are presenting themselves not in the most, say, best manner. So I'm going to talk exactly to that. I think it's about 2 screens from now. What I wanted to, though, was to give you, for those who have bosses that they're connected to, first connection perhaps, and you really don't want to wave a red flag in front of your boss, even if you're happy as can be, you're not looking, but you just feel you want to have a better LinkedIn profile. What LinkedIn does is it sends out broadcast activity notices. And if you're going to go in and spend a weekend messing around on LinkedIn and changing your profile, maybe doing a few different changes, you don't really want to send those out. So what you want to do is you want to go to accountant settings, and maybe I hope at the back you can see this. It's a top right hand, it's a drop-down menu. It's accountant settings, and at the bottom, almost the bottom, it has privacy and settings. So you hit privacy and settings, and another screen comes up, and the top left it says turn on or off your activity broadcasts. I strongly suggest when you're doing stuff on LinkedIn to your profile that you allow that box to pop up and you uncheck it if you're turning it off. And when you're ready to have it, you're all finished and you're happy and you don't mind people seeing it, then, or seeing the changes you made or getting notified, then you recheck that. And by the way, if you say, all right, Ned says something about some box, I don't want to think about it right now, just shoot me an email, phone me, and I'll send this to you. It's no big deal. So in terms of really your question now, getting into LinkedIn and how people go to LinkedIn from a recruiting perspective, we typically are doing Boolean searches. And it's just a search string. And this is a very, very simple one. This is as simple as it gets. And I did it as a test thing when I was preparing this presentation. And I so loved my result that I kept it. And I so loved it because it did a couple of things. One, very simple search, facilities manager in Chicago or Indianapolis. In half a second, it said 37,000 results. Right, I can look through 37,000 results. And that's why you actually, when you do these things, you do them much more complicated. You put in more and/ors and you put in more issues. But I like this because a member, I think he's a member of IFMA in Indianapolis, Brent Blanchard, I don't know, he doesn't know I'm doing this to him. He's being sandbagged by me. But I loved his profile to start with. And that's because he's got something going for him, whether it's by luck or design, that really works from a getting yourself out there. And that's underneath your name is where the people typically put their title. Well, if your title is perfect in describing what you do, fantastic. But for most of us, it's not. Most of people's titles, vice president, director, sometimes, for him, all right, so it says facility manager, Indianapolis Facilities Management at Eli Lilly and Company. Well, that's pretty to the point. That's fantastic. So from a search perspective, that's why he came up first on this search. He's saying exactly what I want. And again, he's probably happy as he can so hardly stand it, so he's not out there, but it's what he's done that brings him, his digital footprint is right out there. So what do? Well, when you're in LinkedIn, when you're making these changes, and I pulled mine back up for a second, because mine is sort of shticky, okay? If I followed the LinkedIn thing, I would have president. Well, big deal, I'm president of a one-man firm, like, whoop-de-doo. Number two, nobody recruiting searches for a president. We search for what are the value add, what do you do? What makes you special? And then and further on in the search, I'll put in the level of seniority I'm looking for. But the fact is, you don't search for a president, you don't search for a director, you don't search for a vice president. You search for a facilities manager or for something like that. So on mine, and I guess anybody in here who's a service provider, of the salespeople in here, you've probably heard this from your sales trainers, which is, put your value add proposition in there instead of your title. So with me, it's pretty bad that I have to read my own shtick. Helping companies source, assess, and recruit the best real estate professionals. So, because it does do what I want, which is if someone is looking for a recruiter in real estate and does a Boolean search, I'll pop up, because I've got search, recruit, real estate professionals. Go on LinkedIn, take a look at what other people have done. Get some ideas. Again, you can be over the top, and you'll see lots of samples of that sort of salesman goes way too far. And some would say, well, Ned, you're living proof of that. I don't know, but think about it. But, think about that second line. Okay. Nope, back. So, I have three main points about LinkedIn. And again, Brent Blanchard has done the first one for me, which is don't put your title, put what you do, put your value add, put what you bring to the table. The second point about LinkedIn that I strongly urge you to think about is the summary section. The summary section is right below that first block. And the summary section on LinkedIn is, to me, it's critical. And there's two ways you can go about it. I think we live in an age of short attention span, keep it simple, stupid. I look at something for 3 seconds and I'm on to the next. And therefore, I'm a big believer in bullet points. So I'm a big believer in putting what your value add, your value proposition, what you bring to the table, and you have to think about it. And you got to think about what's your story. But I'm a big believer in putting 3 bullet points, because again, from a search perspective, from a Boolean search string, you'll get picked up more likely and you'll have a higher rating. Now, other people say to me, and they're more sophisticated than I am, they say, no, write a paragraph. And in fact, if you've got one particular thing, like I recruit in real estate, mention it 3 times in the paragraph. So that's a little trick about search strings and how Google searches and things like that. I don't really quite get that, but I sort of understand where they're coming from. So if you do a paragraph, again, in the paragraph, get keywords that describe what a fabulous, wonderful, whatever it is you bring to the table person in that paragraph. And the final item, and then sort of after this item about LinkedIn, you can go to sleep, because I've really covered the 3 things that I'm evangelical about, the 3 things that I really believe in with LinkedIn, and that is how you describe yourself, the summary page to make it really easy, and then the third item, which people, and I hate LinkedIn for this, but a few years ago, LinkedIn had a contact button that you filled in when you put your LinkedIn profile up. And anyone could see that. And a number of years ago, they suddenly stopped you from being able to see that if you're not a first connection. And that really annoyed me because it took away that ease of contact. So if you look at my LinkedIn profile, you'll notice, because I'm right out there, I'm in your face, I want people to call me or email me. I've got my contact information, I think, in 3 different places. Top, medium, bottom, it's all over there. Well, okay, you say to yourself, I'm happy, I'm not looking for a job. Okay, if there's some great opportunity, I wouldn't mind knowing about it, but I don't want people phoning and bugging me. And I'm not having my personal email, my iPhone or whatever get bombarded with spam from LinkedIn. Do this. Create a separate LinkedIn email account. In other words, go to Google, Gmail, go to Hotmail, go to Yahoo, and create a separate email account that you'll only use for LinkedIn. And use that and put that out there for the world on LinkedIn. It'll be an interesting experiment, and you can flame me with emails if you say, I got 50 spam messages my first day. I don't think you will. I'm right out there on LinkedIn. I don't get spam via LinkedIn. I get it other ways. And again, you're not going to check this every day, right? But you can do 2 things. One, you can say, hey, you know what? When I'm watching football on the weekend, maybe I'll pull up that email account. Or I'll have it at the start auto-forwarded to my home email, so I'll remember to check it, and we'll see what it's like. We'll see if I ever get any action or what happens. Now, if I'm a LinkedIn salesperson, I'm saying, no, don't do that, because LinkedIn has InMail. We've got something called InMail on LinkedIn. Yeah, but InMail costs money, and it's a pain. So I'm going back to my original comment about the change in recruiting. Who's recruiting you? Who might have opportunities? It's no longer just the people like me that focus on one niche. And those people, when they do this search and they're looking for, say, because it's facilities manager in Indianapolis, Chicago, and they get all these results, chances are they're going to reach out to the people that are easiest to contact, because we live in a world where we go with easy. Now, ace recruiter Ned Thomas will have his research associate go after those other people and find their work email, find their work phone. We'll do something to get a hold of those people, because that's one of the things I tell my clients, that I don't just take the easy way out. But the reality is, you want to make it easy. So, in terms of LinkedIn, in terms of summarizing my belief system in LinkedIn is, if you're like me and you think Facebook is for your kids, and it's a pain, and I'm only on it because I got tricked into going on it, and I almost never go on it, but I still get all these emails from them, get over it. You can still believe that about Facebook, but you've got to have a different mindset on LinkedIn. And that is that LinkedIn is a business tool for potential opportunities, and why shouldn't you know about them? I mean, you might not be interested, but you might know someone who'd be perfect for an opportunity, and how much good karma are you sending out there if you can say, hey, Mr. Ms. Recruiter, it's not for me, but you should talk to Frida Smith at ABC Company, because I know her and she'd be great. I don't know, I think that's sort of nice. Being slightly mesmerized by being in front of an audience, I forgot to set my timer as I was supposed to when I started this, so I know what sort of timeline I'm on. And my beautiful watch that was a present stopped at 9:15 this morning. So I've got no idea if I've talked for 30 minutes or whatever. But
about 10 minutes.
all right, so again, you can ask questions when you want. I have a couple more slides which are sort of maybe detailed questions. So I'll try and go quickly over them because maybe they're not interesting to you. But I frequently get asked, how do I respond to different types of recruiters, and what are different types of recruiters? So if that's of interest to you, I'm going to put through it right now. There's your corporate recruiter, which basically works for the company, does work for the company. Sometimes they're on contract, and they are under the control of HR. If you get a call from someone that identifies themselves that way, pay attention if it's with a company that you have any interest in, because there's no screen. They're the person who's going to have dramatic impact. And so when you return that call, be nicer than you would be to me. Agency or contingent simply means that's a recruiter who is third party and who only gets paid if they find Cinderella and Cinderella is hired by the client company. I work sometimes on contingent, sometimes on retained. But the point of the matter is, it's a bit different environment because you know that their motivation is going to be different. Now, that's not necessarily a negative thing, because what it means is they aren't just shilling for one company necessarily. They may have other ideas for you once they get to know you. The retained search firm is what people like me aspire to be, fully retained. Korn Ferry, Heidrick & Struggles, Spencer Stewart. They are the white shoe firms of my industry, and they only take on assignments when they're getting a fee for just being willing to walk in the door and say, yes, we'll work on this assignment. I've never met anybody that would give me any money until I started showing results. They get money up front. It's a wonderful world. If you get a call from someone of those firms, definitely pay attention, because they're the elite. I had a funny conversation once with the managing partner of one of those firms, and I think she was laying it on a bit thick, but she said to me, Ned, you know, I won't take on an assignment that doesn't have a $100,000 fee. I think she was just trying to make me feel like not that big, because my fees aren't that big. But anyway, that's the retained world. Now, where this also plays in, if you are either looking for an opportunity or you are going to respond to something because you maybe have some interest, is if it's a job board posting. Select Leaders is the sort of the real estate job board, but you know, there's others, Monster, Career Builder, you know, there's good job boards out there. Try and figure out who has placed the posting, if only because it will save you a really silly misstep. And that silly misstep is when the posting has been placed by someone like me, third party, and I get a cover that says, Dear Mr. Thomas, I have admired your company for so long. I think it's a terrific place. I just love to work there. I hope you take my application seriously, blah, 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 blah. Well, clearly you're not paying much attention, and maybe you're just throwing out resumes like crazy. So I strongly recommend that if it's being placed by an agency, recruiter, third party, or it's a blind posting, you simply, on your cover, you simply say, Dear Sir or Madam, I'm responding to your posting about blah, blah, blah. I'd be very interested in talking further about this opportunity. It means at least you have got some clue. Attachments and cover letters. Again, this is real detail-oriented. But if you are interested in an opportunity and you are sending in your interest and you're taking time, and I've read such beautiful cover letters that the person clearly, you know, they bled into, but they put them as an attachment. What I have heard from so many recruiters, both HR, any sort of recruiter, is they never get read. Because what happens is we get an email and it typically gets trundled off into our system that extracts the resume and puts the resume into the resume database. The attachment gets ignored. Sometimes it gets cut and pasted into depending on the system someone's working on. So you've gone to all this trouble of writing this wonderful essay on how you'd be such a great addition to General Growth Properties, and you admired how they came out of bankruptcy, and blah, 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 and it never gets looked at. If you're going to do something like that, if you do put it as attachment, God bless you, but copy and paste it into the body of your response email, because at least that has a chance of getting looked at. So that's just a little tip on job board postings. I'm not a resume expert. I do read and see a lot of them. My comment would be, your resume, you know, when someone said to me, oh, you're not going to read your slides. Please don't read your slides. I'm going to read my slide, because I think this one's important. The resume is not a job description. It's a marketing document. It's a chance for you to get into a conversation about an opportunity. Okay, I'm picking on a really good guy here. This is a very, very competent individual. He is a great guy. And I got this from him, and I said, Dear Lord, I happen, from my own perspective, love this resume. Because for me, as a detail person in recruiting, he's got everything. I even love the little Venn diagram he's got too, and that's really cool. But this is a killer. This resume is a killer. This will cause him more hurt than bring him benefits. So, you know, what I said to him was, I said, look, you can keep that, because it's wonderful. And when you get into the drill down situation, it's a brilliant description of the value add, what you've done, what you bring to the table. but it's too much for a first introduction or a response introduction. It is, you've got to take that and bullet point summary and put your key points into half a page, and then you can maybe attach that, so if they really are guns for punishment, they'll go and look at that. But you've got to keep it simple. So don't, if your resume looks like that, I commend you on visual and on graphics, but do a new one. Final comment that I said I would talk about, which is something that's dear to my heart, because I've seen it in action and it kills me. And that is the hiring world's reaction to people of experience, like me. How do you handle it when you're going at an opportunity and you are plus, geez, I'm 30 years, I'll be 30 years in the industry next year. You know, because there's a mindset now where people want young people or they want people with runway. So the only advice I can really give, I think, that has any value at all in this situation is if you are, like me, you have to get across very early in a conversation with a headhunter, a recruiter, a corporate recruiter, a hiring manager. You have to say, I've got 10 years of runway before I even think about retirement. And the reason I say 10 years is because, and this is where I think we're living in, I guess, a pretty hypocritical world. So often hiring managers tell me, you know, oh yeah, we want someone who's going to be around for the long haul. We want someone who's going to, you know, be with us a length of time. Well, give me a break. Nowadays, people spend 2, 3, maybe 5 years somewhere typically, and then they make change, or the company changes. Walgreens. So, you know, it's this. I worked for a guy way back at the start. He used to have the expression "sucking and blowing." People are trying to do both, but you've got to counter that. So you've got to say, "I love working. I have no reason. I'm in great health, and I'm going to have 10 more years before I even think about it." So at least you've dealt with the elephant in the room. So that's, you know, that's the. And by the way, one little anecdote that I still shake my head at. A number of years ago, I did a recruit, and I brought in this wonderful young candidate. She was from India. She was hardworking and smart, brilliant for this role I was doing. And the hiring manager had interviewed her, and I spoke to him after the interview, and he said, "No way, no chance." I said, "Why?" Well, because it was clear that she looked at us as a 2 or 3 year stop in her career, and that she's going to own her own business and take over the world. And I said, yes, that's what you want. You want to hire people like that. Yes. So what's your point? He goes, I won't. She's not even getting a second interview. I said, why? Because I want people to be around for 10 years. Okay, why I keep this story in my head and I find it so ironic is 2 weeks later, this gentleman calls me and say, "Oh, Ned, you'll be reporting to Paul now on this search." I said, "Why? Where are you going?" He goes, "Well, I just got a really great offer from so-and-so, and I can't resist, and I'm taking it." I said, "Hang on, you've been at Macquarie for 1 year." He goes, "Yeah, I know, but this is just a great opportunity. I got to do it for my own sake." Well, duh. I didn't blame him, but this is what I mean. So you've got to counter people's sort of silliness. So I think I probably talked your ear off. Hopefully you get 1 or 2 takeaways. But if there are questions, or if I've confused you, or if I've told you things that just aren't, you don't think are true, then feel free now to shout out at me. I've killed you.
So you got a question or a couple?
Okay, yes.
Ned, on the brief resume, you're familiar with a handbill. It almost sounds like you probably want something more like a handbill that really hits the high points, and then you, person to person, can go into the detail.
Yes, and one more thing. I forgot to say this. What I liked about the resume I did put up there is on the top right, he's got the LinkedIn button. Just hit that button. Because again, you're throwing out markers. You're trying to get people to pay attention and then go further. So yes, I think that's sort of what I suggest. Yeah.
Can you go back to the microphone?
Sorry, so simply, you know, what he said is, I'm a promoter of a one-page resume. I'm a promoter of a document that's not rich in detail, at least at the start of a process. Because nobody gets hired off a first meeting. I mean, it'd be great if it happened, but it very rarely happens. So what you're doing is you're trying to get someone to dig down and say, yeah, this is worth a meeting, this is worth further discussions, this is worth a Skype. At some point, yes, you probably are going to be asked, can you give me a formal 2-page resume that lists all the morbid details? but I think I just think it's not worth the effort to make that your first step. Yeah.
You get into the light introduction. You go into numbers, big numbers, your square footage, your, big things that make sense to those in the industry.
This is, you can't think of everything when you're thinking about presentation, but you've actually hit the nail on the head that you hear a lot, which is we live in a world that people are impressed by numbers, by statements of fact. And so if you're in a position where you can put those numbers down in a document, in your summary, yes, I think, thank you, because that absolutely should have been addressed. And in our business especially, because we're square footage junkies. How many square feet do you manage? How many buildings do you are under your purview? You originally were a one site manager, now you're a multi-site manager. Well, how many sites and how many square feet? Absolutely, yeah. People ask that question, and they are very funny about their arbitrary, he's only managed 3 million square feet. He can't handle our 10 million square foot portfolio. Well, part of my job is to say, can we talk about the type of product he's worked on, what he's managed? And by the way, it's a heck of a lot more difficult than your 10 million square feet, because your square footage is composed primarily of single-tenant warehouse. Yeah.
In LinkedIn, when I first went on, there's, you just go on regular LinkedIn, you fill it all out. But now there's this other version that they have, like, they're always asking me, well, join this version of, what is that all about?
It's about money.
So,
it's about money.
what does that get you? I mean, is it worth it? Does it get it to people like you?
No, I think, that's why I say LinkedIn is a sponsor to this. LinkedIn's trying to monetize every aspect of their site they possibly can, and they do it through LinkedIn. There's different names for different LinkedIn levels. And I've done a number of different LinkedIn levels, and I'm also probably LinkedIn's nightmare in that sometimes I will jump up for 1 month to a higher level for my own nefarious purposes and then drop back down. But I think for a candidate or non-candidate's perspective, for someone who just simply wants to say, yeah, Ned's got a point, I want to present myself in a bit better way, you don't need any of that. You just ignore them and just have your basic LinkedIn subscription. There's no reason to pay LinkedIn money, and hopefully the god of LinkedIn is not going to strike me with lightning or something. Yeah?
Do you take into account the recommendations on the site or the number of connections that someone has?
What was the question?
The question is, do you take into account the number of recommendations or connections someone has? And that is, again, a great question, because I think you've got to ask that question to a variety of people like me and see what answers you get. My answer is absolutely not. And the recommendations that I see on LinkedIn, in my mind, they're total hooey. And I'll give you an example, because I realized, I'm doing a presentation on LinkedIn. Maybe I should increase my recommendations, because I don't think anybody recommends me at all, because I just never bother asking. So I asked a few clients or ex-clients or candidates, whatever, and so I've got some now. But the funny thing is, one of them is a great guy, great candidate. Actually, he's not a candidate anymore, he's happily ensconced. He recommended me for a whole bunch of things. I'm thinking, I've been out of the real world of real estate for almost 10 years now. I'm not qualified for asset management. Maybe I could still lease, because you can't take the leasing out of someone. But, I thought to myself, this says it all about recommendations. They're like, and I'm in a hurry, I'll flip these boxes, and this will work for Ned, and we're good to go. I'd only asked him to recommend me as a recruiter. So, again, I don't know how superficial other recruiters are, but I pay no attention to the issue of recommendations on LinkedIn. I do pay attention to references and wonder why they didn't give me this person as a reference. So that's way off LinkedIn's situation. And your other point about the connections, if I'm in sales. Yeah, I sell. So I think I'm 500 plus connections, which is that, you hit over 500. I'm all for the connections if you're in a sales or marketing environment, because it allows you to get stuff about things that you might not have thought about or whatever. So the people in here that are in business services and all that, yeah, I would be connecting with everybody under the sun, because I think that can only be positive from that aspect. From a recruiter looking at a candidate, no relevance at all. What is relevant to me is your skill set, how successful you've been doing it, and what people are going to say about you that know you, not your mother. Yes?
Kind of goes along with the question you just answered, but the more descriptive recommendations, which will actually write about your performance, does that matter at all for you from your perspective?
Well, I think it's wonderful if somebody will go on the record in such a public forum as saying you're the cat's pajamas. That's great. And then what I would maybe do with that is I would think about getting that person willing to say that in a reference call, or, I think that's great, and it's certainly not going to hurt you having it there. So I think that's a positive. But I think being devious, I would say, okay, this is really nice of this person. How do I set this up to be a real benefit down the road? And then the real way you do that is by being of value to that person in some respect too, right? Karma.
Thank you.
So, let's go. We can go home.
Thank you, guys. On behalf of the Chicago Chapter